So good morning. I'm Reverend Bonnie, the community spiritual leader here at the center. And my hat again goes off to Reverend Pat Conway, because a month ago she stood up here in front of you after a mass shooting in El Paso. And here I am, the first Sunday in September, another mass shooting in Midland, Odessa, Texas. And I am the one to stand in front of you. So I've been taking that into prayer since it happened. My talk was already done. And like Pat, I considered, do I need to do something different? Is there a different message that needs to come through? And yet I realized that the message that was already coming through, and it had to be coming through when they picked the music already as well, is the most important message that I could be bringing to you today. So before we get started, though, I would like us to just take a moment and hold in our mind's eye and in our hearts all those impacted. Everyone, every one of us is impacted, and yet those that are still healing, those that are still in the hospital, those that are family members of those who have been killed, hold them in our hearts, and let's just see them surrounded with love, that which we've already sang about. And see also the victims that are still experiencing from the past shootings that we've experienced around the world, and also those who have perpetrated and their families. In them, I see the greatest lack of love and a place where more love needs to be brought. And so I see for us in this world that works for everyone, greater love being expressed. So anyone feeling the deficit so strongly that they want to perpetrate this kind of behavior, they start to feel love. So we send that love out. We know it goes to every place it needs to go in this world. And it emanates and begins with us. And so it is. And I was going to say also that one of the things I think is most important is that we continue to celebrate life. So I was going to honor Edie and her birthday, but we've already done that. So happy birthday, Edie, once again. So today we start a new month. I thought we were starting a new message. And as I worked on this, I realized that it's really the same message from a different perspective. I almost wore the same outfit that I did before, but I changed, so maybe you'll get it from a different perspective today. But that same message is rooted in the idea of oneness, the idea that we are all one, and that love is the key. Love is God. Love is what expresses in and through us what has created everything that is around us. And that is the one thing we need more of. So, do any of you have anyone in your life that you really, really love? Yeah. Do you have a person or a pet that you really, really love? Or do you have an object? Maybe there's something you've inherited, a gift that's been given to you, a memento from traveling somewhere that you really cherish and that you would say you really love. How do these people and pets and things contribute to your life? Regarding the objects that you really cherish, how do you treat them? Where do you keep them? Are they in a special place where you can see them, or do you have them all nice and clean and wrapped up in a box in tissue paper somewhere? Are you taking care of them in some special way? And then the people and pets. How do you show them that you love them, that you care about them? How often do you tell them how much you appreciate them and how much you love them? Today, again, I think it's imperative that we think about that and that we look people in the eyes and let them know we love them. And so you might not want to walk up to a stranger and say, I love you, but what I think you could do is say you are loved, and even if it's just with our eyes, send that message to the people that you see as you pass them. You are loved. You can think, I love you. And then I want to ask you, do these things and these people actually keep you alive? Do they contribute to your physical well-being? And if not, what does? Now, if you love your mother, she might have been the reason you're here. But today, what is actually keeping you physically alive? Water, air, food that comes from soil and the minerals. And then I thought, in light of what's happened, safe environments and our bodies being whole. How do we treat these things? How often do you consciously appreciate them and thank them for being in your life and being there to sustain your life? How do you show them that you care? What do you think when you think about the earth? And do you cherish it? Like you cherish those things that were given to you or those people that you find so precious and special in your life. So last month, we were talking about mental equivalence. And in this month's Science of Mind magazine, and as you can see from the tabs, I'm going to be speaking from this a lot today. This is a really good edition. I'm sure it's in the bookstore. If you don't get it, I'd suggest getting it. And in this month's Science of Mind magazine then, Reverend Jesse Jennings, summarized a mental equivalent as what you associate mentally and emotionally with a state or condition. And we talked last month about it's the subconscious and conscious thoughts that we have as we look out at the world. And it's those thoughts and subconscious and conscious that we are focusing on to help us create the world that we want to see as well. And so when you think about the earth, what is your mental equivalent? This month, our focus is on stewardship from the personal to the planetary. We're going to be looking at that concept. What is stewardship and how does it apply to us on the personal to the planetary level? So again, when I say the word stewardship, what is your mental equivalent? What is that mental and emotional idea that comes up when I say that word? And if you associate stewardship with the personal, what is your mental equivalent? And then when I talk about stewardship in terms of the planetary, what is your mental equivalent? And of course, when I say planetary, I'm also talking about the earth. And so I decided to go, as I always do, to the definition first. What does stewardship actually mean? And I found the job of supervising or taking care of something, such as an organization or property. Second, careful and responsible management of something entrusted into one's care. To take care of or care for wisely. And then they actually had a biblical definition of what stewardship means when it's used in the Bible. Utilizing and managing all resources God provides for the glory of God and the betterment of creation. So stewardship. I then found in here, there's several articles related to stewardship. That in the article called Stewardship, A Way of Life, at the very end, the author says, our stewardship of planet Earth and our individual communities are as diverse and unique as we are. The world needs what each of us has to offer. By incorporating the concept of stewardship in all areas of our lives, the act of taking responsibility for the future becomes part of our daily living. And so to me, that was another definition, the act of taking responsibility for the future. And she concludes, what is yours to do today and tomorrow? So we often hear about stewardship in relation to finances, being a good steward of our finances. If you take the Prosperity Plus class, you talk about stewardship of what it is that you have and our resources. And then we think about stewardship of the earth, because that's where those resources come from. And last month, I talked about the importance of paying attention to that which we want to heal and that which we want to see grow. And so that's part of what happens when we are good stewards. We're paying attention to what it is so that we can care for it and help it to either heal or grow. When we talk about stewardship of the earth, we're talking about taking care of it so that it can also take care of you. So you might have noticed when I said the earth, I referred to it as it instead of her. And the reason for that is that many, many, many years ago, I think before 1992, before I moved to New Mexico, I was at a workshop. And the person giving the workshop said, we have to stop calling the earth Mother Earth and referring to her as her. And I took a little offense to that at first until I heard the rationale behind it. And that rationale was that historically, in the race consciousness of the majority of the people on this planet, there is not a lot of respect for women, mothers, and daughters. And that if we continue to call the earth mother or her, that we will continue to treat her with the same disrespect that women are treated with around the world. That was the rationale. So that shifted a little bit of my mental equivalent. And then I found it interesting that 2 articles here in the Science of Mind magazine had this to say. The first article is Welcome to Spaceship Earth. It was by Dennis Merritt Jones. And the last section is entitled, How Would You Treat Your Mother? Treat your mother well. All that you have, all that you are, came from her. And then he goes on to explain that in the Greek mythology, the ancients referred to our precious planet as Gaia, the mother goddess who presided over the entire earth. And he talks about how wonderful it would be if we treated the earth like our mothers, assuming we treat our mothers well. And further on, he says, the question is, are you treating her, your mother, or the earth, or both, as well as she is treating you? Yeah, whoa. Then there's another article further on. This is by Callie Holmes Sorensen. It's called Healing Our Planet, Healing Ourselves, Sustainability as a Spiritual Practice. And Callie Sorensen happens to be Reverend Dr. Christian Sorensen, the senior minister at Seaside Center for Spiritual Living's wife. Now, I'm not one who usually likes to give women credence by attaching them to the man in their life, because that's exactly what I'm talking about here. But since Reverend Christian Sorensen is so well known, I wanted to acknowledge that there is a loving marital relationship between him and Callie, and he presented her with an article that she talks about in her article that helped her to shift how she thought about the job that she had in the world. And one of the things that she has now become a recipient of in 2018 is the Walden Award for Care and Reverence for the Earth. And she has created a 3-year plan that was to help her transform her career, her lifestyle, and lead her down a path of sacred activism. And one of the things that she said is that she's a firm believer that we can find balance only when women are offered a seat. Sister Joan Chitziter, I'm not sure how to say that, sorry, Benedictine nun and lecturer, once told Oprah Winfrey, nothing will change in the world until the situation of women changes. And Sorensen agreed, saying that we need to examine the relationship between the devaluation of women through abuse and exclusion from power and the degradation of the earth. She then says, women are the givers and protectors of life. It is the natural role of women to protect the earth. We feel it in our souls when she cries, and it is our maternal call to protect what we love. Further on, though, she says that only by honoring women's voices and our rights can we begin to heal the earth, but men must also be a part of the solution. A new and growing sisterhood of women is awakening to the women's power to transform the world, and we are counting on our fathers, brothers, and husbands to support us and stand with us as we do our sacred work. As stewards of the earth and sacred activists, it's up to us to reboot our consciousness, awakening to both our light and to the shadows of greed and denial so that we may reflect deeply on how our personal choices will affect further generations. So the reason that I wanted to point out these two articles is, first of all, I was quite surprised to see something that I'd heard so many years ago finding its way into our teachings today, the Science of Mind magazine. And I also felt that it was really important to emphasize that women can't do this alone. We're not doing this alone, that it requires all of us, men and women, together. And last week, I talked about the aha that I had in terms of self-care and the message that came from the pain in the knee that I was feeling, that message being that I was believing that I was only halfway supported. And what I realized is that I'm fully and completely supported, and we are fully supported when men and women work together. We can't walk on one strong leg, whether it's men protecting us and us not protecting ourselves, or whether it's us healing the earth and men standing back. No, we need each other, two strong legs to walk on, to be fully and completely supported. So last week, as I talked about self-care and then thought about stewardship, this week I realized that we can't separate self-care from planetary or earth care. So along these lines, I also have been thinking about what practitioner Donna Stryker said during her workshop last week on how not to be a victim. She said during that workshop that women will fight to the death to protect children and people that they love, but not so much to protect themselves. And that really struck me. What is that about? Why? And as I am becoming more and more aware of the interconnectedness of all of us, that interbeingness that I am talking about and that we will be talking about in this book study, I was thinking, what is it that will move through a woman to protect a child and someone else, but not so much to protect herself? And then I realized that I'm sure that's not just all women. I'm sure there are some men who find it easier to be protective of the people they love and not so much themselves. That this is a generalization, but that's a tendency that those who teach self-defense have seen, is that that's what happens when they're working with women. So when a parent stays by a sick child's or parent's or somebody else's bed, they say often that person is fighting for their life. And we use that expression, we need to fight for our lives. And so I thought about, women not wanting to fight for themselves, or even, that tendency, what does it take to fight for our life? And that phrase that we use. And I thought about the word fight. What's the mental equivalent that comes into your mind when you say the word fight? To me, I think about war, I think about fist fights, I think about gangs fighting, I think about violence at the worst and resistance maybe at the best. And yet what I know about resistance is that what we resist persists. So if we say we're fighting for our life, what are we fighting? Are we fighting fear, negativity, a perpetrator, an illness? And again, if we believe that what we resist persists, how much is fighting going to help us? So I started thinking, what could we say instead that would create a different mental equivalent but have the same intention, that is that we value our life? And so I started thinking, we need to say, love for your life. We are loving for our lives. And we need to love as if our lives depend upon it. Because they do. So going back to my knee, This week, I was given the opportunity to consider a therapy that would probably bring the pain level all the way down to zero, that would help me have good quality of life for the rest of my life. It's quite expensive, and so I was hemming and hawing, should I spend the money on myself? When I realized how many times I have spent equal or more on my dogs, seriously, to make sure that they were healthy and that they had a good quality of life. Anybody else with me? You know what I'm talking about? Okay. And I asked myself, in light of what Donna Stryker had said, why? Why am I so willing to spend the money on my dogs or someone else and not on myself? Why am I resistant to that? And what would loving for my life look like? Loving myself. So again, in the Science of Mind magazine, as we talk about loving ourselves and taking care of ourselves, one of the articles talks about how important it is to get your vitamin N. Anyone heard of your vitamin N? Nature is vitamin N. It is organic, readily available, fast-acting, and free, manna for your health and well-being. Time in nature soothes the mind, repairs the body. It elevates the mood, boosts your immune system, increases creativity, relieves stress, releases trauma, and makes you feel more alive and vital. Deepak Chopra affirms that nature restores, refreshes, and invigorates you. Your vitamin N. And the woman who wrote that article said she used vitamin N, getting out in nature, as part of how she healed herself from cancer. And we heard the story about Reverend Kathy Ann Lewis and how she went outside and laid on the earth in her garden. She was working mentally and spiritually with connecting her mind to God, and she was seeing God in all of that, in nature. So she was getting her vitamin N as she was helping herself heal. And so nowadays we have these words, these concepts that go along with self-care. One of them is earthing, and one is a Japanese term, shinrin-koyu, which means forest bathing. Have you heard these terms? Earthing means grounding yourself to the earth, getting your bare feet actually on the soil. The other one, forest bathing, is for the people who live in cities, to get out in the woods. Go to Lilianne's retreat up there in the trees. Walk through the trees. Feel nature. Be in nature to rejuvenate. As ways to take care of yourself. And I thought, what does that say about us? That in the past we didn't have these terms, and now we do. Now we have earthing and forest bathing. In the past, touching nature, having our feet on the earth, was a natural way of living. It just happened every day. We didn't need a word for it. But now we need a word for getting that vitamin N. We need a word for earthing, for forest bathing, because we need to remember, for part of our self-care, we need to get out in nature and experience God in nature. With all the head shaking, I'm sure I don't need to give you any more evidence than that what we do with the earth and how we take care of ourselves is one and the same. That as we care for one, we're caring for the other. And so recently, we've heard in the news there are fires in the Amazon, fires in Africa. There are extinctions happening. The numbers of bees are going down. We've heard about lead in the water, different contaminants now and poisons in other part of the water, global warming, and then things like these shootings that include women and children, random shootings now. What is a religious science response to all of this? I had posted on Facebook about the fires in Africa, and someone responded by saying, "Where is our religious science positive thinking in all this?" And so I started thinking about it. And it seems to me that the earth is experiencing a lot of pain, and so are the people walking this earth right now. And last week I talked about the importance of paying attention to where the pain is so we can find the need behind the pain. Paying attention with the intention to heal and create a different mental equivalent. So again, in the article on stewardship, I thought it was interesting that she started the second paragraph here. She's talking about caring for the planet. She says, recycling and conservation are usually at the top of the list of things we should do to improve the current conditions of planet Earth. But it could be argued that if we live in an abundant universe, why recycle and conserve? There's always more, right? The question is whether we're using the truth of the law of abundance to make an excuse to avoid taking responsibility for our stewardship. And so I started thinking about that as well. The law of abundance and stewardship, and how does all this come together? So, as we walk this planet, and we are sustained by what is on this earth in our physical being, that's what's keeping us alive, are we here as expressions of God to ravage and waste and destroy and abuse? Use it all up? Or are we here to be good stewards? And as religious scientists, we gain a lot of our insights and a lot of our teachings from the work that Ernest Holmes did. He studied a lot of different things, pulled it all together for us, wrote a lot of different books. And so I was looking through his writings for some guidance. The law of abundance. Well, what does that mean? And in his writings, there are numerous places where he talks about natural law and the law. Now, Teresa was right on the wavelength, love, along with the song this morning. She read several things that Holmes wrote about love. And very often when he talked about love, he talked about law. Love and law. So you already heard this if you were at the meditation, but some of you weren't. This is titled Love Rules Through Law, page 43. In an intelligent study of the teachings of the science of mind, we come to understand that all is love and yet all is law. Love rules through law. Love is the divine givingness. Law is the way. Love is spontaneous. Law is impersonal. We should study the nature of reality with a capital R with this in mind, and in this way we shall avoid two grave mistakes. Either viewing life as made up only of mechanical laws or viewing it as made up only of spontaneous actions irrespective of law and order. As we gain a broader viewpoint, we shall see that life must contain two fundamental characteristics. We shall see that there is an infinite spirit operating through an infinite and immutable law. In this, cosmos and not chaos finds an eternal existence in reality. Love points the way, and law makes the way possible. Further on page 52, he says the law must flow through us in order to manifest for us. And there are so many references to the law and natural law, and those are in conjunction with love, that I had another aha. The law of abundance. Yes, we live in an abundant world. We live in an abundant world when we also live in conjunction with natural law. And that requires sustainability, when we live in a way that sustains all those amazing resources that we've been given, when we are good stewards of all the things that we've been given. To assume that the law of abundance is going to continue if we misuse and use things up until things are gone goes against natural law. And Holmes said many times we can't expect things to happen for us that are against natural law. We work with the law. If you think about it, if God created everything, God created those natural laws that are working to sustain us in this existence. So I love it when I finally get it. It was like, okay, all right, now I understand how this works and how I can respond to that question of, well, we live in an abundant universe. That means it's always going to be here, right? We can just keep on keeping on. To think that I can sustain life, my life, without self-care, or the planet without planetary care, goes against natural law. Self-care and planetary care could be called stewardship, and it works hand in hand with natural law. So I get it. God expresses as health in my life when I live in accordance with natural law, the natural laws of my body. When I'm a good steward of my body, mind, and spirit. When I love myself. When I take care of myself. When I respect myself. And I get it. God expresses as the abundance of this universe, the abundance of all good things, when I'm a good steward of all those good things. When I care for the earth, when I respect and love the earth, and when I wisely use the resources in a sustainable way. And I get it, that God expresses as peace and safety in our world when I live in accordance with the natural law of oneness. When I and we live in accordance with the idea that we are all one. When we are good stewards of each other. When we love each other. When we take care of each other. When we respect each other. I heard on NPR last night someone talking about that commandment to love one another. And it seems so much more relevant today as I thought about why it is that was the main commandment, to love God and to love one another. Because when we do that, when we live in accordance with that law of oneness and loving each other, then we are safe. Then we are at peace. So I think we need to look each other in the eye, look the stranger in the eye, and at least think you are loved. I love you. I think it's essential right now. We need to love for our lives, and we need to love as if our lives depend on it, because they do, and so it is.